I know you're running some kind of illegal political operation out of this cabin. I'm going in there right now to document whatever corrupt activities you're hiding." That's what Karen Blackwood screamed from the deck of my lake cabin, crowbar in hand, eyes wild. Like she'd been waiting her whole life for a moment this dramatic, this self-righteous, this downright unhinged. Now, imagine sitting at your own dining table, mid-conversation with an actual state senator about environmental bills, sipping coffee, deep in the weeds of legislative strategy, then looking up to see your neighbor, Karen, about to break down your door because she's convinced she's about to expose the crime of the century. Yeah, that happened. Let me back up a sec. Because before Karen Blackwood's personal episode of CSI, Lake Serenity turned my Tuesday into a three-ring circus of law enforcement, political embarrassment, and honestly, pure chaos. There was just me, Thomas Anderson. 10 years, I'd been coming out to this spot, my little haven on Lake Serenity, 2 hours from the noise of the state capitol, where I could unwind from my real job as a senior partner at a government relations firm, dealing with renewable energy laws, environmental policy, the whole shebang. Sounds boring, I know, but my world was a constant blend of legal jargon and big ideas, until the day my professional life collided with Karen's wild imagination. See, what Karen, and most of my neighbors, never realized was my cabin wasn't just a place to grill burgers and fish for bass. It was also my go-to venue for discreet, high-level policy discussions. We're talking real legislative work, not secret handshakes and bags of cash, but still, the kind of stuff you don't want splashed on Facebook by somebody with too much time and not enough sense. That's why I'd picked the place. Peaceful, private, and just secure enough for people in my line of work, with encrypted calls, secure internet, and a meeting space that made state senators feel safe enough to talk shop. All of it worked perfectly, until Karen moved in across the cove. Now, Karen came in hot, like someone had handed her a badge and a mission. She put herself on every HOA committee, started logging the cars in my driveway, snapping photos of any official-looking visitor, scribbling notes about suspicious activities. She acted like she was in an episode of Homeland, except her main weapon was a clipboard and her main clue was her own paranoia. To her, government work was just a polite way of saying corruption, and lobbyist meant criminal. She cornered me one morning while I was prepping for a renewable energy session, ranting about how my meetings broke community rules against commercial activity. When I tried explaining what a registered lobbyist actually does, she demanded to see my disclosures, as if she had the authority to conduct her own ethics review on my porch. Of course, I tried to set boundaries, but for Karen, that was just proof I had something to hide. She doubled down, recording license plates, stalking public records, even drawing her own little political corruption map of the lake. She started whispering to neighbors, suggesting my place was ground zero for backroom deals. I'd be lying if I said it didn't get under my skin, but at first, I figured it would blow over. It didn't. Instead, Karen started filing complaints, real, official complaints, with the State Ethics Commission, the media, even the police, all based on her investigations. Each time, nothing came of it, but every complaint left a trail, a documented record of harassment, false reports, and, as it turns out, interference with legitimate government operations. Thing is, when you mess with government business, especially anything touching state security or elected officials, you start pinging on a lot of radars you really don't want attention from. That's what happened to Karen. She tripped all the alarms. See, my cabin's not just for show, it's wired. Security protocols, encrypted logs, live feeds. And as Karen ramped up her crusade, the state's own threat analysts started paying attention. They built a little file on her, watching for escalation, because in my line of work, you don't just brush off somebody stalking and harassing government meetings. Karen thought she was Nancy Drew, but to the people who actually handle security, she was looking a lot more like a real problem. And then came her big move. Fed up with being ignored, Karen decided the only way to save her community from corruption was to catch me red-handed. Except her version of justice involved breaking and entering. She picked a Tuesday when the most official-looking cars were parked outside. What she didn't know was that Senator Williams was inside, flanked by Capitol security, her aide already thumbing 911 when Karen smashed her way through the side door. Security cameras got the whole thing. Karen, crowbar up, righteous as ever, then freezing when she found herself face-to-face with a sitting state senator and two officers who were already dialing in the cavalry. Now, if you've never seen someone go from smug to terrified in 2 seconds flat, let me tell you, it's a sight. Karen tried to stammer out some nonsense about citizen oversight, but by then, the cavalry had arrived. Capitol Police, state investigators, local deputies, all trained for this kind of situation. Not a neighbor squabble, but a real threat to government officials. They locked down the scene, documented everything. Her entry, her so-called evidence, her homemade dossier. Senator Williams, who by the way used to be a prosecutor, started taking statements, making sure everything would stick when the DA saw the files. You'd think at that point Karen would back off. Maybe claim she'd made a mistake, try to cut a deal. Not a chance. She kept insisting she was exposing corruption, waving her files like they'd save her. But the more she talked, the worse it looked. Investigators dug into her months of surveillance, her notes, her photos, her sketches of the cabin, her logs of every visitor. What she'd built, they said, wasn't oversight. It was an amateur intelligence operation targeting state government, complete with plans for forced entry. It crossed every legal line. Word spread fast. Suddenly, Lake Serenity was in the news, not for base tournaments or 4th of July fireworks, but for the arrest of a local HOA committee member on charges that sounded like something out of a crime drama. Breaking and entering, criminal harassment, interference with government operations, even domestic terrorism statutes. The HOA rushed to clarify they had nothing to do with Karen. Other residents came forward saying she'd tried to recruit them for undercover work, and the senator issued a public statement. Basically, community oversight doesn't mean felony crimes. The trial was a circus. Karen's defense tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, just passionate oversight gone too far. But the state's case was airtight. Security footage, witness testimony from the senator and security officers, every crazy note Karen had ever written. There was zero evidence of any real wrongdoing on my end, and mountains of proof she'd crossed the line from busybody to criminal. In the end, she took a plea, felony charges, real prison time, supervised probation, and her beloved lake cabin sold to pay restitution. She was banned from any future oversight roles, her name now a warning to anyone who thinks a clipboard makes them above the law. The wildest part? The whole mess ended up bringing the community together. People realized the difference between real civic engagement and paranoia-driven harassment. The HOA rewrote policies, more respect for residents' work, more legal boundaries, and a lot more caution around self-appointed watchdogs. My own reputation? Honestly, it got a boost. Elected officials, knowing the protocols worked, felt safer coming out for real policy work, and the senator herself even used the whole ordeal as a lesson in why security matters. But here's the thing. What really sticks with me isn't Karen's meltdown or the circus of cops and cameras. It's the lesson underneath it all, the thing nobody ever talks about when they rant about government secrets or corruption in their backyard. There's a world of difference between holding people accountable and taking the law into your own hands. Between asking honest questions and staging a break-in. Between suspicion and evidence, oversight and harassment. Karen thought she was some kind of hero, that her community badge gave her the right to do anything in the name of justice. She learned, the hardest way possible, that democracy has guardrails for a reason. The people she tried to expose, the real government folks, didn't have time for conspiracy. They had laws, and they had the power to enforce them. Her story became a case study, used in law enforcement training, quoted by legal experts, and whispered by every HOA board in the state as a cautionary tale. So next time you hear someone claim community authority means you get to play vigilante, or that a gut feeling is the same as proof, remember Karen's story. Real oversight means working through proper channels, respecting the law, and knowing where your rights end and someone else's begin. When those lines get crossed, especially against the wrong people, the consequences are very real and very public. Now, what about you? Have you ever seen someone confuse suspicion with justice? Or take a community feud way too far? Drop your thoughts below. Let's hear where you stand. Is this just one bad apple, or a sign of something bigger in our communities today? I'll be reading the comments, and honestly, after all this, I'm dying to know what you think. Is T.